It, Lex, come on, brother. Help. Come on, son. You need to, who, I mean, aren't you like a physics major or something?
You had, by the way, I should say, an excellent conversation with Donald Hoffman.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, he's interesting.
is there any inkling of his sense in your mind that reality is very far from actual, like objective reality is very far from the kind of reality we imagine, we perceive, and we play with in our human minds?
Well, the first thing to grant is that we're never in direct contact with reality, whatever it is, unless that reality is consciousness, right? So we're only ever experiencing consciousness and its contents.
Right.
And
Well, the first thing to grant is that we're never really in contact with reality. We only ever know what is in our own minds. The first thing to grant. The first thing. Is it? No, I don't grant that. The first thing to grant is that you can never really know what reality is. Did you hear him right? We are hearing him right? Granted, there is no way to know reality. Continue.
and then the question is, how does that circumstance relate to, quote, reality at large? And Donald Hoffman is somebody who's happy to speculate, well, maybe there isn't a reality at large. Maybe it's all just consciousness on some level. And that's interesting. That runs into, to my eye, various philosophical problems that
This guy, whoever he is no different. He's no different than Kant. He's no different than Heidegger. He's no different. He takes a primacy of consciousness to the primacy of existence. Your conscious exists, and then everything else, who knows? He says it doesn't even exist. Sam Harris says, well, let's see what Sam Harris says. But he's already said you are never really in contact with objective reality. Denying the existence of a reality or your ability to know it. How is it any different? If you can't even know reality, done. I mean, now you're gonna get subjective.
or at least you have to do a lot. You have to add to that picture, in that picture of idealism. That's usually the whole family of views that would just say that the universe is just mind or just consciousness. At bottom, will go by the name of idealism in Western philosophy. You have to add to that idealistic picture all kinds of epicycles and kind of weird coincidences, and to get the predictability of our experience and the success of
And then all this rambling of you have to get to weird predictive cycles and idealism. This idea that consciousness is primary to reality, and there is no real reality, and you can't know objective reality, is no different. What Sam Harris is talking about is that you can never know reality. If you can never really know objective reality, and then they're saying it doesn't even exist, what's the difference? Once you put consciousness primary to existence, it's all the same argument. You are all the same, you guys. And you're all wrong. The way we know you are wrong is because you can't... I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Materialist science to make sense in that context, right? And so the fact that we can... What does it mean to say that there's only consciousness at bottom, right? Nothing outside of consciousness, because no one's ever experienced anything outside of consciousness.
I mean, he's trying to say, like, Well, we can't really, our ability to make predictions and verify predictions and understand reality and materialism, and we can't really reconcile with the fact that we can understand reality, but yet we can do experiments to understand reality. How can you live in such a contradiction? It's such unclear thought processes. And Lex is just there. Lex is just like, yeah, we can never, right? Like, no questions about the fact that we can never understand reality. And then he tries to use the fact that we can make predictions and experiments about reality to understand reality. It's the contradiction, it's glaring in its contradictions. And we're just getting started.
No scientist has ever done an experiment where they were contemplating data, no matter how far removed from our sense bases, whether it's they're looking at the Hubble deep field, or they're smashing atoms, or whatever tools they're using, they're still just experiencing consciousness and its various deliverances, and layering their concepts on top of that. So
he goes to talk about measurement tools that man has created. Telescopes, the Hubble telescope. We've created these tools to measure reality. And then he says we're only really measuring our consciousness of reality. We're not even really measuring reality. It's complete nonsense. It's using the fact that man has as a conceptual animal, has created technologies to explore the universe, clearly shown that we understand quite a bit of it, to then say that we're using science only to prove what we know in our consciousnesses and never know reality. It upsets me. I don't mean to be this aggressive, but it's upsetting to me. Lex, come on, brother. Help. Come on, son. You need to, aren't you like a physics major or something?
That's always true, and yet that somehow doesn't seem to capture the character of our continually discovering that our materialist assumptions are confirmable, right? So
it's like watching a mind out of focus in action. I mean, struggling to understand how we can confirm predictions through experimentation, and that science is an error-correcting mechanism in search of truth to create good explanations, to understand the nature of our metaphysical reality, in order to recombine it to create technologies to move societies to abundance. Like, he's dismissing everything of science, and here he's trying to reconcile with himself. He's got this primacy of consciousness belief that tells him whatever he believes is true and he can never know reality. And then he's like talking about how we measure reality, and using science is only, it's so ridiculous when you listen to the words coming out of his mouth. And then he starts talking into concepts. We layer our concepts on. Like our concepts are just some random, we just layer all these concepts on. What is a concept? Do you have concepts? Do you have the definition of a concept? What is your theory of universal? If you don't have a theory of we just layer the concepts on. What is a concept? Sad. It's sad. It's sad watching a mind so out of focus.
Take the fact that we unleash this fantastic amount of energy from within an atom, right? We have the theoretical suggestion that it's possible.
He's like spinning his wheels now. Well, take the fact that we're able to split an atom and create energy. That we can't understand objective reality. There's no way of us consciousness to really understand what it is. But the fact that we can split the atom, and then he's trying to like, and we can create a theory, a hypothesis, a what if, that what if we did this? And it's not just some random ass like, what if? It's like, you know what, from what we already know about these things, what if we try to know a little bit more about them? What if we try to continue experimenting to see and learn more? And this guy is he's like confusing himself. And he doesn't even know. And that's what confuses you. You are confused when you listen to this yibby yabber gibberish about knowing reality and then proving that we can know reality to only contradict yourself.
Right. To come back to Einstein, there's a lot of energy in that matter, right? And what if we could release it, right? And then we perform an experiment at, in this case, the Trinity test site in New Mexico, where the people who are most adequate to this conversation, people like Robert Oppenheimer,
people of the mind, scientists, people that have discovered a lot about this metaphysical reality and want to discover more through the process of science, through the scientific method, a method to search for truth, an error-correcting method to search for truth, a method that says, I don't know, but I'm going to ask a question and then I'm going to look to objective reality to determine whether I can get a result on my question and whether that result confirmed or did not confirm what I thought might be the case, and continue to do so to learn and unlock and understand reality, to split atoms, to create energy and machines and technologies. But we can never really understand objective reality. Only all these scientists, these great minds, go and understand reality. And your idea that, we're only understanding our conscious perception of reality is bullocks. It's bull. It makes no sense. You cannot have a primacy of consciousness and then, utilize these stolen concepts whenever you choose to somehow obfuscate the truth, which is you don't know what you're talking about. You and Kant and all of you who are trying to assert that it's just all in our mind, except the things that's not just in our mind, except all the things that we can objectively determine through science and experiments are truth. Yeah, those things. But there's all this other stuff we can't even know, except all those things that we know. And who's the arbiter of that? I mean, we can't know it, so what? You're going to just tell us because you know everything? Because you know?
Are standing around not altogether certain it's going to work, right? They're performing an experiment. They're wondering what's going to happen. They're wondering if their calculations around the yield are off by orders of magnitude.
Yeah, they're not sure it's going to work. It's called an experiment. If they were sure that it was going to work, then they wouldn't have to do it. We're sure this is going to work. That's kind of like what you would do, Sam Harris, is you get a thought and you're like, well, my consciousness is greater than reality, and if I believe it, then that makes it truth. Then why do you need to do anything? If you just need to believe it. You don't need to confirm it through science, all of everything, objective reality to confirm it. No, you think that's what it is and that's what it is. So why are all these men gathered around doing what ifs? Because they don't know. Because they don't know what if. They're trying to understand what if. And in doing so, deploy the scientific method as an error-correcting mechanism in search for truth. Do you even know what truth is? Here's what truth is. Truth is the identification of a fact of reality. That is truth. Everything else is not truth. Everything else is what if, we think, maybe, hypothetically, possibly. It's when we identify a fact of reality, and we identify it through fact-finding, through the search of truth, which is error-correcting mechanisms to take hypotheses and say, not that one, nope, no, wait a minute, maybe, Let's continue. No, it's a frustrating process to search for truth. Not if you have this primary conscious Sam Harris, be like, man, it's whatever I think it is. Nobody really knows what true reality is. And you're so snobbish and egotistical about it. And it's so wrong, and it's so destructive to the people that don't understand it. And because
Some of them are still wondering whether the entire atmosphere of Earth is going to combust, right? That the nuclear chain reaction is not going to stop. And lo and behold, there was that energy to be released from within the nucleus of an atom, and that could, so it's just.
And lo and behold, there was this energy to split the atom. Lo and behold, who knew? Who knew it would be there? It was there. Go figure. The universe didn't explode, it was there. Well, they were making educated guesses along the way to say, we think it's there and we're going to experiment. But he's like, lo and behold, like they just were walking through a field and stumbled over it. And they're like, lo and behold, look at this, nuclear energy. It's like, no, lo and behold, look at him. He's like, he himself cannot reconcile that we can know reality and understand it. And so he's like, lo and behold, because he can't understand it. Because to him it is unknowable. And so he can't believe that other people can know reality. And he's trying to confuse you the same. And it upsets me. I don't mean to be this aggressive, but it's upsetting to me. The destruction of the mind, the questioning of the mind, the placing the mind outside of its reality, removing it from existence and saying it's this separate thing that cannot be this can't be understood, that can't be understood, we can never know reality. And then talk about all the ways in which we do know reality, and then say, lo and behold, there was some it worked.
What the picture one forms from those kinds of experiments, and just the knowledge, is just our understanding of evolution, just the fact that the Earth is billions of years old and life is hundreds of millions of years old, and we weren't here to think about any of those things.
The Earth is billions of years old. Humans have been around for hundreds of millions of years. And we weren't here to think about any of it. Exactly. We weren't here to think about any of it. It existed all this time, and we were not here to think about any of it. But now we are here. Thinking about it doesn't make it so. Right? Thinking about it doesn't make it so. It is so, and then we think about it. But he's consistent with his primacy of consciousness. I wasn't here to think about it, so therefore it doesn't even exist.
And all of those processes were happening, therefore, in the dark. And they are the processes that allowed us to emerge, from prior life forms in the first place. To say that it's all
for us to emerge from these prior life forms. The theory of evolution, evolutionary biology. He's just going to discount all that too? He's going to just blow by all that and just it was around for billions, then hundreds of millions. Our ability to now do these things, evolution, evolving, continued whether we were here to see it or not.
Nothing exists outside of conscious minds of the sort that we experience. It just seems, like a bizarrely anthropocentric claim, analogous to, the moon isn't there if no one's looking at it.
I mean, again, what he is saying here is to say that reality doesn't exist is a long shot. That's a long shot. But me saying that you can never know reality and that his level of subjectivism is a better type of subjectivism than the other guy who's, and Kant and Heidegger, and they're all the same. They're all the same. To say that his form of primacy of consciousness and subjectivity of reality is even too extreme for my form of the primacy of consciousness and the subjectivity of reality, well, that's a long shot. I don't quite go that far. But what I'll do is I'll just say you can never know reality. There is no such thing as understanding reality. That I'm comfortable saying. This guy is crazy. It's because you're all based in a subjectivity, in a mind out of focus that doesn't understand reality. A disavowing of our conceptual consciousnesses, a disavowing of the fact that we have minds and they work, and every day you walk around and you take advantage of technologies that were developed by this mind, a mind that understands reality, a mind that can take inert matter in the ground and unlock energy. And to say that, how can we understand reality? Lex, come on, son. Come on, man. Do you agree? Do you agree, Lex? Ask a question.
Right. I mean, say the moon as a moon isn't there if no one's looking at it. I'll grant that, because that's already...
Now it's going to get even nuttier. Now it's going to get nutty, McNutterson. The moon's not even there unless you're looking at it. I'll grant it. I'll grant that. I'll grant that the moon's not even there unless you're looking at it. The first thing that a baby learns when you have a child, it's like this idea of things exists even though you don't see them. And as that comes in, it's like peekaboo. Like when you play peekaboo with a baby and they giggle because it's like, holy moly. Because as the mind begins to focus itself and understand reality, the mind begins to realize and to error correct and to prove that even though my mom is not in the room, she exists. If you really practice that shit, and here's where I get angry, Sam Harris. Philosophy is practical philosophy. So for you to say that you never know that reality can exist, and this whole idea that if things aren't there, do they even exist? You can't operate that way. That's the first thing a child learns. You cannot operate that way with no concept of that existence will remain consistent. That it's just whenever I look, it could be anything. You can't function that way. You couldn't exist. Literally, the mind couldn't exist if there wasn't some existence to anchor it to. Else it would be floating in abstraction all the time with nothing to compare anything to. It's complete bullshit. Lex, aren't you like a physicist? What is your qualification? I like you. I get angry though. I don't mean to. I can't help it. Think about what you're telling children, man. You're destroying the mind. I don't want to use expletives. It's effed, man. It's upsetting.
A kind of fabrication born of concepts, but the idea that...
Did you hear what the man just said? The moon is a fabrication born of concepts. Listen to the words. Do you understand the words coming out of my mouth? Rush Hour, Chris Brown. One of the Chris's. Chris. Rush Hour, Jackie Chan, Chris Brown. Do you understand the words coming out of my mouth? Piece of content, that's a concept. Sam Harris don't even know anything about concepts. We are mimetic creatures. Whatever, that's for the next. The moon is a fabrication of concepts. This man claims to believe it. Lex, brother, come on. Is that what you would tell your students? If you were talking to a 10th grade class, would you tell them that the moon is a fabrication of concepts? But then go visit the Gigafactory on your tour and say that we're going to Mars in these spaceships that we created with our brain. But the moon, the moon is a fabrication of concepts. I'm not saying throw hands with him at this time. Maybe just some jits. Anything peacefully. If you want to believe it, Sam Harris. But you're destroying philosophy, you're destroying the mind, you're destroying the future, you're destroying everything when you say stupid shit like the moon is a fabrication of concepts. Come on, man!
There's nothing there, that there's nothing that corresponds to what we experience as the moon, unless someone's looking at it. That just seems just a way too parochial way to set out on this journey of discovery.
There is something there. There's a computer waiting to render the moon when you look at it. The capacity for the moon to exist is there. Right. So right. If we're indeed living a simulation, which I find a compelling thought experiment, it's possible that there is a kind of rendering mechanism, but not in the silly way that we think about in video games, but in some kind of more fundamental physics way.
And we have to account for the fact that it renders experiences that no one has had yet, that no one has any expectation of having. It can violate the expectations of everyone lawfully, right? And then there's some lawful understanding of why that's so. It's like, just to bring it back to mathematics, I'm like certain numbers are prime.
It's all your subjectivism. Whether the moon is there, whether you look at it or don't look at it, it is all, if you have a primacy of consciousness, it's all the same, man. And that's why that is an invalid philosophical, epistemological, metaphysical, ethical system. It's the destruction of philosophy. Your anti-mind philosophy is the nothing. It is the nothingness. It doesn't exist. Your philosophy doesn't exist. It can't be practiced. The fact that you can't even know reality at any level, whatever your subjective level, whether you think the moon is there when you look or not, all of it is the same if you deny the primacy of existence to consciousness. The primacy of existence to consciousness. The fact that, here, do you want to understand it? I'll explain it to you. Existence exists. We perceive it. That is the definition of consciousness. We perceive something other than ourselves. I am aware. I am conscious. I am this. That is that. The law of identity. A real philosopher by the name of Aristotle, the law of identity. Things are what they are. They have a nature. The Aristotle calms me down because it is truth. They have a nature. They have a particular set of properties. We can find out what they are when we understand the properties of it. We can understand how it operates, determine whether it will continue to operate that way through experimentation, learn, understand our metaphysical reality. Existence exists. I know that because I'm perceiving it. You come into your consciousness. You are conscious of something. Of what? Something. Versus, I exist, and that's it. With nothing to exist in. The consciousnst is existence. You can't, and here's what you try to do. Here's your magic trick. It's not a magic trick. It's just your propaganda. It's trying to slip it in. You're trying to exempt consciousness from the law of identity. The law of identity. This is this. This is that. This is a hydrogen molecule. This is an oxygen molecule. This is an atom. And this is the law of identity. And you want to exempt consciousness from it. Everything is what it is except consciousness, because my consciousness determines what everything is. It's so stupid. I don't know another word for it. It's just stupid.
Whether we have discovered them or not, right? Like there's the highest prime number that anyone can name now, and then there's the next prime number that no one can name, and it's there, right? So it's like it's to say that our minds are putting it there, that what we know as mind in ourselves is in some sense putting it there. That the base layer of reality is consciousness, right? That we're identical to the thing that is rendering this reality.
The base layer is no, that's my whole point. The base layer is not consciousness. The base layer is objective reality. And so, again, you're not going all the way down Heidegger and the other guy who's unimportant, who say that does it even exist? We don't believe it even. It's all your same subjectivity. It's all your same primacy of consciousness. This idea. And this idea that, yes, there's these prime numbers. We're discovering them. They exist to be discovered. We are learning. It's called science. We're trying to understand the universe, the thing that you say we can't possibly understand, but we understand a lot of it so far. That's what we're doing. While you try to destroy it through a primacy of consciousness to exempt your consciousness from the law of identity. Exempt your consciousness from the law of identity. That's what you're doing. You're putting it as a primacy above existence. And so you're trying to exempt your consciousness from everything else that exists and say that everything that exists it only exists in your consciousness. You're being conscious of it. Without that, it wouldn't exist. Yeah, to you maybe. It wouldn't exist to you because you wouldn't be conscious of it, because you wouldn't have identified anything other than yourself. But that ends the minute you identify something is when that's how you become conscious. The identification of an observable reality, a perceivable reality, a sensory reality, something that you perceive exists. Oh, I exist. Not the other way around. Not I exist. Oh, so does that. No, the mere idea of existence is the first of the law of identity. It's all to be identified. You can't exist, you can't exempt consciousness from the law of identity. No, you're so wrong, and it's so bad what it will do to people, and has done for centuries, to people that utilize it to deny and evade reality and ruin it for everybody else.
there's some, hubris is the wrong word, but it's like it's like it's okay if reality is bigger than what we experience, and it has structure that we can't anticipate, and that isn't just. Again, there's certainly a collaboration between our minds and whatever's out there to produce what we call, the stuff, of life. But
Again, a mind trying to reconcile within itself its own inherent contradictions. There is some, our minds and existence come together to define what we think reality is for ourselves. What the percentages are of how much is our mind and reality is, it's all just this primacy of consciousness. Yours is no different than his or any of the others. Once you establish conscience as primary. And yes, it is okay. It is okay that observable reality is greater than we have observed to this point. To this point, right? That's the whole point. You're running back to Heraclitus and others talking about the stuff of the universe. And yes, at that time, within that context of human knowledge, that was their understanding. Remember, they didn't have YouTube and stuff to communicate with each other about ideas. It's like, so one smart dude is just, or whomever it is just like, all right, I'm working this problem. But then we have the context of human knowledge and human history and knowledge gathering and science and data and error correction to search for truth and good explanations about the natures of our realities. And we learn more as we go. Knowledge is contextual. Human knowledge is contextual. So what he said about what Heraclitus, I think, said about the stuff and other philosophers did, great. Now with all this context of 2022 information gathering, the benefit of understanding the universe better through technology, that we can be like, whoa, man, we're getting to understand it. We're going to make rockets to Mars. Elon's putting a rocket and going to put some people on some Mars. And you just talked to him, Lex. And now this guy's saying the moon is a fabrication of concepts and we can't really understand reality. Again, it doesn't matter whether it's the other guy or him. A primacy of consciousness, it's all the same. If it's not the same, then you don't know the game. Because then it's like, well, my consciousness over theirs. My consciousness over theirs. What is that based on? How many people I can convince to agree with me, to indoctrinate, to confuse, to Kant about you don't know reality. But I can tell you what and then listen to me. God, religion, simulations, all of it. It's all saying you don't understand reality. You can't. It's all consciousness, but it's my consciousness you should listen to. I'm the one who's talked to God. I'm the one who's talked to aliens. Aliens, all of it, anything. It's all the same if you don't know the game. When you know the game, it's all the same. It's all just this primacy of whatever I think it is, versus it is, and I am aware of it. Oh, I'm conscious. Let's continue, and then go and learn and science.
It's not the idea that it's. I don't know. There are a few stops on the train of idealism and kind of new age.
It's the first time you said anything I agree with. Yeah, you don't know.
Thinking and Eastern philosophy that I don't, philosophically, I don't see a need to take.
Right.
The place, experientially and scientifically, I feel like you can get everything you want, acknowledging that consciousness has a character that can be explored from its own side, so that you're bringing kind of the first person experience back into the conversation about what is a human mind and what is true, and you can explore it with different degrees of rigor, and there are things to be discovered there, whether you're using a technique like meditation or psychedelics. And
how long is this? I'm getting mad again. I mean, not to take it that far, but you can find everything you need to find within your own mind and your own consciousness. You can understand it all within your own mind without ever really experiencing objective reality. You can get everything you need. And if that's not enough, meditate and do drugs.
And these experiences have to be put in conversation with what we understand about ourselves from a third person side, neuroscientifically or in any other way.
But to me, the question is, what if reality? The sense I have from this kind of, you play shooters.
No,
There's a physics engine that's pretty.
I have, you mean first person shooter games? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
Sorry.
No, not often, but yes.
I mean, there's a physics engine that generates consistent reality, right? My sense is the same could be true for our universe, in the following sense, that our conception of reality as we understand it now in the 21st century is a tiny subset of the full reality. It's not that the reality that we conceive of that's there, the moon being there, is not there somehow. It's that it's a tiny fraction of what's actually out there. And so the physics engine of the universe is just maintaining the useful physics, the useful reality, quote unquote, for us to have a consistent experience as human beings. But maybe we, descendants of apes, are really only understand like 0.0001% of actual physics of reality. Like this, we can even just start with the consciousness thing, but maybe our minds we're just too dumb by design.
Oh, yeah, I
Come on, man. Do you believe that? Do you believe that, Lex? Is that your sense of life? Is that your sense of life, that we're just too dumb? Is that what you would tell your child? Come on, man. The idea that reality is that vast. Truth. And we're figuring out. We are figuring it out. How long have we been around, and how long... I mean, look at the scale of human history. How long we've been around and what we've accomplished in that time. And there's no other reason to believe that can continue. If it wasn't for people like Sam Harris and others who say you can't understand reality, and as much as you understand, you still can't. And this, we're too dumb. And even if you're just theorizing, maybe we're too dumb. Really? Is that what experience has told you? How can you sit down with an Elon Musk in a gigafactory and talk to that man, and then sit with Sam Harris? I don't mean you should take side on it or anything. But, you should, think about the contradictions between the two and how stunning they are. And how the law of non-contradiction. What is logic? Would you say you were a logical person? Would you say you are logical? Aristotle? Turing? Shannon? If you're going to say you're a logical person, what is art? What is logic? What is logic? Logic is the art of non-contradictory identification. I'll tell you again so you hear it. Logic is the art of non-contradictory identification. And then you sit in these things with all this contradictory identification, and it's a muck, it's a mess, it's mud, it confuses people, it confuses children. All these children that are watching this, as you contradict each other and search for truth by taking for granted we can't know anything. Continue. Man, it makes me mad.
That truly resonates with me, and I'm surprised it doesn't resonate more with most scientists that I talk to. I mean, when you just look at how close we are to chimps, right? And chimps don't know anything, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, they have no idea what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And then you get us, but then it's only a subset of human beings that really understand much of what we're talking about on any, in any area of specialization. And if they all died in their sleep tonight, right, you'd be left with people who might take 1,000 years to rebuild the internet, or if ever, right? I mean, literally, it's like and I would.
Okay, now look at the look on his face. I don't mean, and he some of this is objectively true. That there's only a certain amount of people that alive understand how to do certain things. That this knowledge is not widely spread. That there's certain experts in certain fields that if they weren't around anymore, then we would struggle to rebuild that knowledge base to move reality forward, which all rests on the fact that we can understand reality and that we can learn and develop technologies. Again, the contradictions are so great. And the reason, one of the reasons, ever heard of it? One of the reasons is telling people they're too dumb to understand reality. And then blame them for being too dumb to understand reality. Not giving them tools and education and everything and desire and the sense of life that you can. The efficacy that you can. Because the reality is it's the greatest time to ever be alive. Is that if you understand things, you have a telephone and a Wi-Fi, you can now, boom, explode ideas to create abundance for humanity. Unless you watch a lot of Sam Harris podcasts and he tells you that you can never know it. It is sad. What you're saying is sad. The amount of people who understand the human workings of their mind to be able to be successful and create an abundance is limited. It's limited because of you and other people like you who tell them that they can't understand their reality and therefore go into the mind and never leave the mind. You got to go out of the mind and touch the reality. You can't live in the mind. The mind does not take action. The mind, while your conscious is a volitional consciousness and you are a rational human being, the mind itself can't pick the thing up and build the thing out of it. It has to be able to, about what? About reality. And maybe we only know this much in this long, and maybe we're stupid like you think we are, Lex, but we're doing pretty good so far. And we'll continue to do so without the help of people who are literally trying to talk about the destruction of it.
Extend this to myself. I mean, there are areas of scientific specialization where I have either no discernible competence. I've spent no time on it. I have not acquired the tools. It would just be an article of faith for me to think that I could acquire the tools to actually make a breakthrough in those areas.
Faith, an article of faith, an article of faith, an article of faith. Now we get to the true inherent knowledge is that I would look for some innate knowledge into my brain. Isn't that what that is? Isn't that faith and all what that is some knowledge that I am given that I didn't have to pursue myself. Some innate knowledge that was gifted to me, and to just take it as absolute truth and never question it. It was given to me, and that's what I need. And that everything that we do is to try to get back in touch with that innate knowledge. And that's Platonism, and that's all of that innate ideas and mysticism and primacy of consciousness. Your consciousness, whether it's your conscious or somebody else's conscious, that it's some sort of primacy over the existence of actual reality to be conscious and aware of. Your contradictions are stunning.
And I mean, your own area is one. I mean, I've never spent any significant amount of time trying to be a programmer, but it's pretty obvious I'm not Alan Turing, right? It's like if that were my capacity, I would have discovered that in myself. I would have found programming irresistible. My first false starts in learning, I think it was C. It was just, I bounced off. It's like, this was not fun. I hate trying to figure out what the syntax error that's causing this thing not to compile was just a fucking awful experience. I hated it, right? I hated every minute of it. So it was not, so if it was just people like me.
Yeah, you are no Turing. And yeah, it is people like you. It's people like you that, yeah, that's not your bag, right? You couldn't understand it, so therefore it's not understandable. I couldn't understand it, therefore it's unintelligible. Which is ultimately where you go with your primacy of consciousness. You're exempting your consciousness from existence because you don't understand it the way Lex does. And you don't have to. But that doesn't mean that existence is subject to your consciousness. You believe what you want to believe, but that doesn't mean it's true. And you're fortunate that other people do understand it. A person like Lex understands it, and other people. And we can connect on technology developed by science to create the tools to further connect, to create the further abundance. It's knowledge sharing. It's the trading of information. It's ideas are the new oil. It is resources. You want to talk philosophy, you should get Naval, Brett Hall, all of the alls together, and I mean, come on, man. When is this? I'm so sick of. I don't want to hear anything he has to say, but I want to finish this.
Left, like, when do we get the internet again, right? And we lose the internet. When do we get it again, right? When do we get anything like a proper science of information? Right, you need a Claude Shannon or an Alan Turing to plant a flag in the ground right here and say, all right, can everyone see this? Even if you don't quite know what I'm up to, you all have to come over here to make some progress. And there are hundreds of topics where that's the case. So we barely have a purchase on making anything like discernible intellectual progress in any generation. And yeah, Max Tegmark makes this point. He's one of the few people who does in physics. If you just take the truth of evolution seriously, right, and realize that there's nothing about us that has evolved to understand reality perfectly. I mean, we're just not that kind of ape, right? There's been no evolutionary pressure along those lines. So we are making do with tools that were designed for fights with sticks and rocks.
You're talking about humanity and man as a conceptual animal and criticizing him for not evolving faster. Also telling him that he doesn't have the capacity to understand it. Right? So evolution takes time. The speed at with which we are evolving. I mean, we should talk to Naval more than you. Impatience with actions and patience with results, right? But we're taking the actions to understand, to do, to learn, to know. The fact that we don't know it all yet, I mean, is this the kind of philosophy you would teach a child, right? Right? You think about the children, philosophy is practical. If you can't practice your philosophy, you shouldn't have it. Practical. About telling you can understand it. You can figure it out. You are capable. This thing's pretty powerful. You just need to learn. The more you learn, the more you know, the more choices you have, the more what ifs you can create, the more technologies you can develop, now connected with other people that have the same, with no restrictions to access of information and the ability to do all this stuff. We'll get it. The technology is now finally coming online. It has been, not finally, contextually, our technology is growing till we hit an inflection point where the technology catches up to, now we know what to do with it, or what new questions to ask, what new what ifs to ask, what new hypotheses to create, what new way to move science forward. And we will get that, and we are getting that. But we're getting that by encouraging the idea that you can know your mind, reality exists, existence exists, we are conscious of it, law of identity, all of the above, to create the abundance. And this pessimism regarding our ability to do so because we haven't yet. Well, once we fix this stuff, we'll get faster if we could get some help.
Right. And it's amazing we can do as much as we can. I mean, we just, you and I are just sitting here on the back of having received an mRNA vaccine,
Yes.
that has certainly changed our life, given what the last year was like, and it's going to change the world if.
Oh, it's going to change, all right. You guys are both sitting there on the back of getting a new mRNA vaccine that's going to change your lives. It's going to change your lives, all right. Completely change your lives.
Rumors of coming miracles are borne out. I mean, it's now seems likely we have a vaccine coming for malaria, right, which has been killing millions of people a year for as long as we've been alive.
It's a miracle. We found a cure for... It's a miracle. No, it's not a miracle. It's science, man. It's our ability to understand reality. You think we don't use... We can never really understand reality. Do you listen to the words that come out of your own mouth?
I think it's down to like 800,000 people a year now because we've spread so many bed nets around, but it was like 2.5 million people every year. It's amazing what we can do, but yeah, if in fact the answer at the book of nature, at the back of the book of nature is you understand 0.1% of what there is to understand and half of what you think you understand is wrong, that would not surprise me at all.
It is funny to look at our evolutionary history, even back to chimps. I'm pretty sure even chimps thought they understood the world well. So at every point in that timeline of evolutionary development throughout human history, there's a sense like there's no more. You hear this message over and over. There's no more things to be invented.
But 100 years ago, there's a famous story. I forget which physicist told it, but there were physicists telling their undergraduate students not to go to get graduate degrees in physics because basically all the problems had been solved. And this is like around 1915 or so.
Talk about a glass is half empty, motherfucker. Talk about a glass is half empty, motherfucker. If at the end of the book it said, hey man, you guys figured only this much out, I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised. This pessimist, skeptic, primacy of consciousness, is this the type of human being you want to be? Is this the type of person that you yourself want to be? This is the unfolding, unraveling of a consciousness that is pessimistic about life for the sole reason that we haven't figured out as much of it as we should have already figured out based on what? I mean, what is this sense of life? But it's a long podcast. I can't wait till it's over. It's 14 minutes, just it's in its entirety. And then it's like, where are you going with all this, man? What is this person's sense of life? He approaches it as to be endured, and at the end of it, we only figured this much out. You know, like, we only figured this much out. We're dumb and stupid. We can't understand reality, and we're nothing. Do you have concepts? Do you have the definition of a concept? What is your theory of universals?